Lakeside Dental Clinic, Go Island, is brought to you by Lakeside Dental Clinic.
We're thinking pumpkins, we're thinking Halloween costumes, we're thinking Halloween parties. What about Halloween films? That's what we're thinking today on Go. How you doing, dude?
Local filmmaker taking it to the next level, a random act of magic in Parksville and collecting for historical significance.
We're at Film Buff Video today. We're going to talk to a real film buff about the genre of horror. But first, there's a local filmmaker who has been working on a feature film over the course of the last year and is looking to step it up to the next level. Here's Todd Jones. We are on the subject of film today. Clinton Thornley, Film Buff Video. We're talking horror, fright, scare, whatever you want to call it. Classic?
Classic.
Classic. We're going to get into classic horror films later on this edition of Go Island. We're going to categorize kids into a category all of their own because we want to scare them, but not too badly, right? And we have here Hostel. This is one way to handle and treat fear, horror in the movies. How so? How do you describe this
That
genre
movie is all about
genre?
gore, and that movie is about hunting humans and the vicarious thrill you get at being lawless and sadistic.
And is that a theme in horror movies? Are there a lot of...
There's a lot of torture that goes on now in horror films, and there's a lot more gore than there ever used to be. They've really ramped up the blood squibs and have them splattering all over the screen in order to amp it up a little bit.
Why do you think that is?
I don't think that a modern audience has the patience for suspense thrillers.
Okay, which leads very nicely into suspense thrillers. What have we got here? Misery. Now, this isn't directly connected to Halloween.
Not necessarily, but it is a scary film. It's suspenseful. It's a thriller. It's also Stephen King, who's a genre writer of horror. And there's a great new Spanish remake of this film called Shrew's Nest, which is virtually similar in story and just as scary, if not more so.
Now, as a film buff yourself, do you have more respect for the work that would go into something like Misery than something like Hostel? Do you think that the gore is an easy, cheap buyout?
It is an easy, cheap buyout, and I think that the literary classics that get translated into horror have a lot more cachet to them.
Now, one of the things that we're not going to get into a bit later when we talk about kids and classics is who rents horror movies?
Teen girls.
Teen girls, please don't go into the basement in that tank top with a flashlight with a dead battery. Why do teen girls, in your opinion, rent the horror movies?
I think they don't have a real natural element of fear in their lives, and it speaks to the human condition that we all need an element of fear in order to motivate us. I think adults have plenty of fear with the worrying of their children, with economics, their mortgage situation, the state of the world. They have a lot more of the world's burden on their shoulders than carefree teenagers do. So they like the vicarious thrills they get when they're not in actual jeopardy.
And is it a popular genre? I mean, not just at Halloween, but overall, do movie
Throughout the year, teen girls love horror films, and they rent them all year long. And there are even older men that rent horror films, to my surprise. But they carry on year round, but of course they get more popular at this time of year.
You know the best way to watch a horror movie? You go like this, and then you gotta peek through so that you can see it's not.
You need the peekaboo fingers in order to tolerate some horror films, for sure.
We're gonna come back and talk about kids and classics when it comes to horror.
Still to come today, magic with Michael Barron's, rapid fire with the Nanaimo Clippers, and a collection of antique motorcycles.
We're going to explore kids' horror movies. We don't want to scare them too badly, and we're going to look into the genre of classic. It's a favorite of Clinton Thornley here at Film Buff Video. And I just want to share that I've never really been into the horror movies. I don't like to be scared when I can control it. I remember getting scared at an episode of Gilligan's Island. There were headhunters on the island, and I somehow got it in my head that every time I flushed the toilet, it was their key to jump up from behind the bathtub and chase me down the hallway. I would literally run out of the bathroom every time. Mind you, I did believe in that time that I was living in a haunted house. That might have had something to do with it. Headhunters and haunted house, I don't know. I much prefer magic. Here now is another installment of a random act of magic.
All right, we are here at Qualicum Beach at the Beach Hut, and I have met some nice new friends here. Where are you guys from?
Arizona.
You're from Arizona. Awesome, awesome. My name's Mike. We're gonna do a little bit of magic, and I brought a plunger. You've probably seen one of those before, huh?
We need one.
You need one. All right. Well, I have a deck of cards here, and this is what we're gonna do. This is a smart plunger. I'll show you what I mean. If I say one, it takes off 1 card. Pretty cool, huh? If I say 2, you say 2.
2.
2, very good. It takes off 2 cards. I know, we'll do it again. This time say 3.
3.
Very good. Takes off 1, 2, 3 cards. Not only can it take them off all at the same time, it can do them one at a time. That's pretty cool. What if we trip it up a bit? What if we say 7? 7. Whoops. There we go. 7. Little windy, but that's all right. Let's take a look and see how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. But you know what? A lot of people try to mess me up. And they do the weirdest things. They say like 52. 52. Well, let's see if I can do that. Boop.
All right.
Yeah, we did 52. Mary, do me a favor. I just want you to reach in here and pick a card, any card you want, Mary. That's the card you want? All right, show the camera up there.
All right,
No, behind you.
got it, yeah, got it. Very good, yeah, perfect.
Perfect. We're gonna drop it down. All right, Mary, your card's lost inside of the deck. This is what we're gonna do. I need you to whisper the name of your card to the plunger. Don't tell me. Did you get it?
It's got a wireless mic in it.
That's right. Let's see what happens. We're gonna take it, put it on. Oops, there you go. It stopped right there. You ready? How did we do?
You got it right on the money.
Awesome, awesome. And that's it for another random act of magic.
Slightly under duress, Clint has agreed to have a little conversation about kids' Halloween movies. And just because he says he doesn't have any kids of his own and actually doesn't like kids in general, I think it's safe to say, this is Clint as a kid. I had to remind him that he too was a child one day and liked to watch movies, no doubt. He started young. Kids' movies, what do you recommend?
Well, I recommend
don't
anything
wanna
by
freak 'em out
Pixar in general,
entirely.
but Monsters, Inc. isn't particularly scary, but it's a lot of fun, and they have a lot of fun with the monster genre. And this is another 5-star gold film from Pixar, so these guys always do well.
You can never know what's going to scare kids either. I mean, my little daughter was freaked out at Monsters, Inc., but she's not scared at things that I think are too harsh. So.
It's hard to guess what they're going to be scared about. Everyone likes haunted house stories, and so Monster House is an actual living monster house. And so these kids have to go investigate it and find out that the house is itself alive. So it's a little bit frightening for kids, but they like this film, and it is an animated film, so they always like anything animated. And then another film that I like, this is for older kids, and this is rooted in
Older
a
kids
classic
being
story. I'm thinking somewhere between 10 and 13 or so. And this is partly live action with costumes, and this has James Gandolfini in a great performance, and this is based on a beloved children's book. So this is one of my favorites.
I think one of the things we tend to do is look at movies that we want to watch now and look for what's new and recent, but we're going to look at some classic horror later, and I just saw Beetlejuice. I mean, this came out in when, the 80s?
In the 80s, yeah.
My kids could watch this today. Just because I saw it 20, 30 years ago doesn't mean that it's not new to them. So there's something that you can take away with you today. We're going to throw things over now to Dan Marshall. It's Rapid Fire with the Nanaimo Clippers. We're inside Film Buff Video at South Parkway Plaza in South Nanaimo talking horror flicks for the horror season. You're a fan of the classic.
I like a lot of the older movies. I mean, I grew up as a kid in the 70s, and so a movie like Jaws really scared me from swimming ever again. And there's a lot of interesting parts about Jaws. For instance, the opening scene where the woman is getting pulled down underneath the water, that came about because the mechanical shark named Bruce, which failed, they had to improvise in order to pull off that scene. And because they inferred the horror of what was going on, they left it to your imagination to fill in the blanks, which is usually a better technique to use. And a person that was good at using that technique was Alfred Hitchcock, who usually left more to your imagination.
Because then you can tap into your scariest.
Exactly. In the movie Psycho, we don't really see the knife hit the flesh, but Alfred Hitchcock is kind of maligned as being a horror movie director, but really Psycho and Birds are the two scariest movies that he did make, and a lot of the other ones were more suspense dramas. And in a movie like The Birds, the scary part isn't that the birds are attacking you, it's the fact that the natural order of things has somehow changed.
Right.
And we don't know what else that will entail besides just the birds. And then another movie that's a great film is a movie that Martin Scorsese thinks is one of the scariest films of all time, The Haunting. This was done in a remake with Catherine Zeta-Jones in the 90s. And this film is really about paranormal investigators going into a haunted house. And you could also argue that the X-Files have roots in this storyline as well.
Okay, now some of these ones here, they go quite, most people don't know the original Dracula. They're going to know one of the several remakes.
Whenever you have classic literature, you have a lot of different adaptations of that classic literature. There's probably about 10 different Draculas and Frankensteins and variations of those themes that have been explored. And so the classic literature have great stories to them, but they're not what modern horror films are accustomed to, or horror film fans are accustomed to in terms of the amount of gore or splatter. They leave more to your imagination, but the stories are a lot greater, I think, and richer stories. And so the classics like Frankenstein, and even Bride of Frankenstein is well regarded as a 5-star film. It's not a campy B-movie classic by any means. And for those who aren't schooled in seeing the classics, they need to know the root of where a lot of these horror films come from, and they should avail themselves to seeing the classics before they move on to more modern, gory fare.
You have to get past the technology.
Well, the technology is still decent. Like if you watch The Creature from the Black Lagoon, for instance, the costume still holds up to this day, and the scene of the creature swimming underneath the woman where she doesn't know it's there is still a creepy scene.
Right.
And so some of the effects are actually quite good even for their time, but sometimes you do have to look over the lack of special effects in order to get to the meat of the story. And I think the classics are far more enriching and satisfying, particularly to an older audience that don't really want to experience gore or, you know, images that they can't unsee.
Going to the other end of the spectrum from classics to what do you think is the best, scariest, most well done horror movie of today?
A modern horror film?
Yeah.
It's hard to say because a movie like Devil's Rejects I really liked, even though that kind of straddles the line between gangster and horror, but I liked it because of the nature and the sociopathic nature of the assailants. You didn't know what they were unpredictable. You didn't know what they were capable of. And because they'd lost their empathy and their humanity, they were capable of almost anything. So when you broach that theme of having somebody that you just can't trust is going to, you know, toe the line in terms of, you know, the decorum between human interaction, that's when I think is scarier than some of the shop-worn themes that we've seen over the years, be it the possessed child or be it, you know, the haunted house themes or whatever. They've been shop-worn, and so are zombies and vampires.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of that. So TV shows are now jumping into all this horror genre as well. So now we have American Horror Story, we have Hannibal, we got Bates Motel, and of course the ever-popular Walking Dead zombie series. So television's starting to get into the horror genre more than they ever have in the past.
And Clint made an interesting point before we started rolling the camera that there's a lot of horrors that take place for real in our world, and you can look at documentaries and get scared by what goes on every day, and that's sort of a bad note to end it on, but that's what we're gonna do. Most classic car and bike owners collect for nostalgia, buying vehicles that are connected to some childhood memory, but Rayanne LaPlante is going to introduce us to a man now who collects motorcycles for historical reasons. That brings us to the end of this edition of Go Island. If you have any questions or curiosities about horror films, Clinton Thornley at Film Buff Video is your guy. Come on down. He'll tell you what you can rent without getting too scared or super scared out of your wits, if that's how you like to be. That is it for this edition of Go. Before we do sign off, I'd like to just share a story that came to me at the Nanaimo Child Development Center telethon that was held at the Port Theatre recently. Andrea LaRue is an occupational therapist here in Nanaimo. She has 2 children, and I was told that her husband was recording a CD with Valley Hennel and Rick Scott on Protection Island, and she was pretty much left on her own a lot during that production process with a new baby to boot. And at the end of it, and Andrea is a bit of a singer herself, and at the end of it, they decided to bring her into the studio, and she's releasing her first CD now. There's a launch party taking place on October the 18th at ohmTown Yoga, and Rick Scott will be there as well as Nico Rhodes on piano and clarinet. It's a pretty rare opportunity to experience those 3 artists from right here in our region. October 18th, ohmTown Yoga. Thanks for watching this edition of Go Island. We'll see you next time.
Lakeside Dental Clinic Go Island is brought to you by Lakeside Dental Clinic, a division of the Vancouver Island Implant Center, delivering dental services, including dental implants and sedation dentistry, all under one roof. Clothing supplied by Catwalk Fashions. Kate's Hair and Aesthetics provided by Maffeo Salon.